Welcome to For Mannerless Women, a space that is committed to nurturing a new generation of shame-free women who are ready to meet their best selves. I'm your host, Adele Onyango, and in this episode, we're hanging out with Daisy Kaindi, who's a counseling psychologist and the lead counselor at ConvoCare. And today we're talking all about childhood trauma. So first and foremost, Daisy, thank you for always making time to come and talk to us as a community about all things therapy, healing, and wellness. And for just sharing your expertise with us.
Wow.
So in this episode, why I've invited you is talk about something that we see come up a lot, either on our healing journey, on social media. And I'm not sure we have a good handle or definition of it.
Yes.
Childhood trauma, right? In the African context,
Yes.
you sometimes will hear how people talk about how they were disciplined by their parents. And I'm like, were you a prisoner? Like, what's happening? Sounds very traumatic, but it's normalized, right? Or like for me, growing up in a home where my dad was physically abusive to my mom, because there were so many homes that had that, again, it seemed to be very normal, right? So I just want us to be all on the same page when understanding what childhood trauma is. So what is it?
Okay. What do you think?
I think it is a traumatic childhood. Traumatic childhood. Okay, I'm going to throw some words out. It's safety. So anything that threatens the safety of a child, be it physically, mentally. I think it looks at the needs a child has, and sometimes we think it's just like basic food, shelter, and what are those things we learned? Clothing.
Yes.
But there's a lot more, right?
Yeah.
So anything that threatens what a child needs. Am I on the right track?
You're actually on the right track.
Okay, but over to you, the professional. What is it?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me, and you look amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So just to define what childhood trauma is, I would like to also refer to it as adverse childhood effects.
Okay.
And basically, it's just what you've defined. When the safety of a child, especially as they grow up, is hindered and they feel a lot of fright, a lot of terror, either emotionally, physically, or psychologically, then we could define it as childhood trauma. Usually, it ends up having a lot of effects on the growth of the child, and also even as they grow older, if it is not addressed, then usually it's what now we refer to as childhood trauma.
I like that you brought in the bit of growing older, because for me, my therapy journey, I went in because of an event that happened in my adulthood. And I kind of like kept wondering if the therapist was on the same level, because she kept on taking us back to childhood. And I'm like, no, but last week.
That's what happened in your childhood.
Exactly. And it's only with time that I could draw connecting lines between maybe patterns, repeated patterns in my adulthood, between how I respond to things, decisions I was making, emotions I was feeling, back to childhood. I was like, oh my God, so like 80% of this shenanigans I'm trying to heal here started way back then, right? So maybe let's unpack that, right? So what exactly are these things? You have examples of these situations that inflict adverse childhood effects on children. What are some examples?
Okay. So just like I said, emotional, physical, psychological. So emotional, when there is emotional abuse or emotional neglect, and a child grows up in a family where she's not emotionally aware, she's not taught her emotions, and so they have a challenge navigating their own emotions. Physical, when they experience physical abuse. Either they see it happening to their parents or the people around them, or it actually happens to them. So that is physical trauma. Psychological, when they get probably verbal abuse, or they're constantly put in situations where they feel psychologically looked down upon. So in instances where they experienced bullying, when there's a huge traumatic event as they grew up, for example, post-election violence and how it happened can cause psychological stress and trauma. So physically, emotionally, psychologically.
I feel like we don't see that children can be affected emotionally and psychologically, right? Maybe because we're socialized. If I can't see it, okay, you know, right? But if you think about even the words parents or even aunts, etc., say to kids, they can stick with them. And they could actually cause adverse childhood effects. Hey, okay. So what is some of, for example, for me, when I went to therapy, some of the things that surprised me about my behavior now as someone in my 30s, you know, still stemming from things I learned in childhood because of the environment where my dad was physically abusive, right? So I loved having guests over or when we were not in the house, because then it kind of meant to me like my dad will behave, right? I learned how to be, I don't know if it's called hypervigilant. Like I can sense.
And hypersensitive.
Yeah, like I'm like, because his was, he would drink a lot and there would be a switch.
Wow.
So I learned to, like, the switch is coming, it's coming, it's coming. And oh my God, I wonder is he just going to sleep or is he going to, you know? And so now in adulthood, it's almost like I'm learning how to just relax around people. Like if your tone dips or something, I'm like, okay, is everything okay? And am I going to be okay? You know? So even just being in my home alone and enjoying that, I was like, I'm only learning that now because even in my 20s, etc., I was still carrying on things I learned for survival as a child. So could you maybe like unpack that? Like, is that, are there other, should I call them survival personalities and tactics that you learn as a child that you keep doing as a grown-up?
Okay, so just to mention that our brains are very powerful and very smart. So in a traumatic environment, your brain basically tries to protect you. And so I'm going to talk about three responses. First of all, your brain could respond by fight. Then there's flee. And then there's freeze. So fight could be seen, if we're talking about childhood, a child who is aggressive, who is a bully, for instance, could be responding with a fight response. Their brain feels like the best way they can protect is by fighting back. We need to fight back. And if you look at it, even as you grow up, if you actually don't address, you'd find that most of the situations that you find yourself in that are similar to that experience in your childhood, you end up responding to them by fighting. The next one is fleeing. So a child who is who likes to evade things. So for example, they keep on running away. They I once spoke to a teenage client who kept on running away from schools and changing schools. Basically, that is the flee response. And then now there's the freeze, where the child is completely unaware and not present even in school. There's low concentration, lack of focus. So that is the freeze. Usually, most of the times when they need to respond, they don't respond because they're in the freeze response. Usually, even in adulthood, you'd find now when there is an argument, instead of getting back or addressing conflict, they either just keep quiet. So that is now the freeze response.
And and then does your brain get so used to keeping you safe that even when you're out out of that unsafe environment, it's still like,
exactly, yes. So your brain gets used to it to the point that even when you're safe, it still gets into that response. So even when you need to, generally, even sometimes when you actually need to protect yourself, because your brain transmitters have been shifted a bit, then you find yourself not actually even protecting yourself, because you've gotten used to these responses so much. Yeah.
And so when you look at childhood trauma, before we even get to how it comes along with us into, like, let's say, intimate relationships, before we leave the childhood era, as a last born, I want to know more about this firstborn daughters. In an African home, because I see them talk a lot online, and it's almost like not sharing. They're just like, hey. Like, let's not talk about it. And I'm just like, no. What did you experience? It sounds like there's trauma there. So in, like, the African family, if we contextualize it in the typical African family, do you see a situation where firstborns do receive a lot of things that could end up giving them adverse childhood effects?
So most of our African families are actually dysfunctional. And you want to say,
you're laughing when you say that, you're like, you guys don't know.
I wouldn't want to generalize. I'm sure there are very many beautiful families in Africa, but a couple of them are close-knit dysfunctional families. So in a dysfunctional home, usually there is a scapegoat of the home, who usually carries the blame, the trauma of the family. And so it's easier to blame them because the family has appointed them to be the scapegoat. And it's a manipulation tactic of the parents. So they try to make this person the scapegoat so that the others do not feel like do not see what is happening in the home. So I think with what is happening, and maybe with every situation it's different, but I could say that perhaps you'd find most firstborn daughters being this scapegoat in that home, where they carry the pain of the home. They're the ones who are blamed for many things. If you don't do this, you have to be an example to the rest. So I think to explain it psychologically, it's just that in a dysfunctional home, with the poor communication, with everything that is happening in a dysfunctional home, usually they look for one person they can put the blame on.
And I think also sometimes they're even parentified. Is that a word? So it's like they're deputy parents. Exactly. And I'm like, so do you even experience a childhood? Because like you're checking people's homework, and you're like making sure your younger people have younger siblings have eaten. Okay, so now when we get to adulthood, one thing I experienced is like in intimate relationships, this damn childhood trauma thing still finds its way in there. Sadly. And it's like, oh my God, can you leave me alone? So what are the ways, just off the top of your head, in which childhood trauma comes with us into our relationships? Like, what does it influence?
So for that, I actually brought an illustration. Can I use...
As long as you're not playing football, I'm good.
Okay, so I'd like to use you an example.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I'm good. I'm ready.
Okay. So I have 3 balls over here. Each one of them different sized. I would like you to reflect on your childhood and basically your inner child and how they're feeling right now.
How much time do we have?
Should be short. Should be a short exercise.
So much, Daisy. Okay, so the biggest one represents my inner child being most free. This is an amount of freedom.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So I actually just wanted you to pick depending on how free your inner child feels.
I feel if I pick this one, my inner child is just like, are you sure? Put that thing back. I would say this.
Okay. I think I would have picked that as well.
For me?
Yes, for me.
For you?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because so what would cause my inner child to be bound up? Because this is like lowest amount, like probably no freedom.
So this inner child is unheard and decent too. And in adulthood, it seems like the grown person does not look to see what the inner child feels. Mostly hidden because it's small. It's easy to hide.
Yeah. Until you can't.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then this is the middle one.
Yes, the middle one.
Okay.
Which it's relatively
depends
open.
on the day.
Depends on the situation.
And the trigger. Yeah.
And this being the biggest is the most free. So for this one, the grown, the adult in this case, looks into the inner child to understand how they're feeling, to understand if they're a limitation or a strength.
So we're all trying to get to the big ball.
Yes.
Okay.
We're all trying to get to the big ball.
All right.
Yeah.
This person is completely oblivious of how the inner child is acting out. Like they don't know, but there are symptoms and these personality traits they have. That are because they're because they have neglected the inner child.
They've completely neglected the inner child. It's not their fault. Perhaps they actually did feel neglected as they grew up. And so for that reason, they have learned that the inner child does not exist.
Okay. Now, we're all carrying these different sizes.
Yes.
And then we get into intimate relationships.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh, guess what? Your childhood trauma is still there. So what are the ways in which childhood trauma shows up in intimate relationships as adults?
Okay. So depending on how you viewed relationships as a child, it has a lot of ways that it shows up in your intimate relationships. So as children, we depend on our parents for physical, emotional, psychological support, just like we talked about. And as a child, you use your parents' relationship as a model.
Oh, damn. Like so, even without you knowing.
Yes, without you knowing.
Okay.
And usually it forms your view of relationship, your perspective of relationship, and also leads to you forming the attraction styles, how you attract to people, how you find yourself in relationships. And so this childhood trauma usually shows up in relationships with insecure attachment styles.
Okay.
Where you find yourselves in relationships with insecure people, or you become the one who is insecure in relationships.
So let me get you right. It affects who we're attracted to.
Yes.
And how we appear in that attraction, like how we arrive in that relationship or in that whatever it is, situationship, whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is that why? So in terms of, let's take the attraction bit. I can present myself as a case study.
Okay. Right? Great.
So my childhood, let me put my inner child away. My childhood, I have this father who is abusive, and my mom finally leaves him, and then I see like thriving and blooming from her leaving, right?
Wow.
But obviously then there's like father wounds and issues that come along with it. So what do you think how do you think that would affect who I'm attracted to? Okay.
So with the fact that your mom left and she bloomed from that relationship, number one, it affects how you view relationships. It creates a perspective. So you feel like perhaps I could do better if I'm alone. So it could either cause a fear of relationships. In relationships, relationships also, perhaps you could find yourself looking to leave, or being scared that the relationship would come to an end. And also with the fact that you had an abusive dad, then it means that you how you view men as a whole is that there is a lot of fear. So you find yourself getting very fearful in relationships, and this could lead you to being an anxiously attached person in relationships. I don't know why you laugh.
Why are you shouting?
Yeah.
Anxiously attached person. Okay. This is true. I said this is a safe space. We're going to be honest. This is
completely safe.
This is very true. So anxiously attached, that definitely, as I work my way to being more secure, I feel like that's very true. Like there is a heavy fear of abandonment. There's points where I feel like, let me abandon first. Or there's that, and then there's also, we're laughing about that, and these are serious things. There's that, and there's the element of anything looks like abandonment. Because my brain is like hyper vigilant. Like any small thing, it'll round it off to like, and that means abandonment is coming. So like, stay ready.
Yes.
It could be a missed call. Wow. I've gotten so much better, but like I don't know if I was not in therapy if I'd have been able to like catch it. You know? So you're spot on with me. Please, let's talk about other people now.
Okay.
So there's the anxiously attached.
Yes.
What are the other?
The other insecure attachment styles. So there's the anxiously attached. There is the avoidant. Okay. The avoidants usually love their independence. They love a high sense of independence. So don't get me wrong. They really want to be in relationships. They desire relationships, but they really love to have their space. So you'd find them wanting to take a step further and be alone for some time. And now when they're in the relationship with an anxious, the anxious feels abandoned. At
every moment.
Yes.
If someone is listening to this or watching this rather and is feeling like I can hear bits of me in the anxious, but I can also hear bits of me in the avoidance. Is there like a middle ground?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the fearful avoidant is a combination of the anxious traits and the avoidant traits. Basically, the fearful avoidant is very afraid of commitments. Again, they desire to be in relationships. They love relationships, but they do not like commitment. So you'd find them being in very long situationships that do not get to committing because they are very afraid of commitments, basically because of what they saw as they grew up. Perhaps commitment led to a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, and they made a decision, maybe I'm not going to get married ever again. I'm not going to get in a relationship in my whole life because commitment to them costs a lot of pain.
This is very interesting because if you look at how relationship advice is packaged on social media, it's almost like a one-size-fits-all. And so I always use the example of, you know, you'll see content around like, if he doesn't pick your call, he just doesn't like you. And to an anxious mind, I'm like, bets. But there's like a lot of context that's missing. And then I also feel like it doesn't mean someone is an asshole. There's just issues that are, you know, from childhood, as we're talking about, that are difficult to maneuver. Right? Okay, so like leave us anxious. Take us easy. No, okay, so there's fearful, avoidant,
and anxious.
Okay.
But there is also now the secure.
Okay. Where are these people? I keep asking Daisy. These secure people, have they secluded themselves somewhere in like an island somewhere and said they're not going to mess with the rest of us? Like, where are they? So the secure person, is it a lie? or is it incorrect for me to say they had a positive childhood? Or what? Who's this? Okay. Who are these unicorns?
So basically, for these people, the emotions were encouraged in the home, and they also saw thriving relationships, and they also were part of them. They were part of thriving relationships, and so they learned how to trust. They learned how to depend on the other person as well, and so they form interdependent relationships in adulthood, where they depend positive, healthily on the other person, on their mates. Yeah.
But they can still also meet their needs to...
Yes.
They're also independent in a healthy way.
They're independent in a healthy way, but they can also depend on their partners.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, when we look at, as we come close to the end, but when we look at like the role of women in an African setup and in relationships, if we look at like gender roles, etc., how do you see those predefined is the word, gender roles, like a woman in a relationship should do, you know? How do you see those affecting a woman's mental wellness?
Yeah, what do you think?
As a very mannerless woman, who's not domesticated, I think it's sad. I'm not sure how it affects women, but from the outside looking in, I think it's sad because we only get one life. And this one life, you're in it, and then all of a sudden you're being told, you can't wear this, you can't be this, you have to be this now that you're in a relationship, or that you should aspire to a relationship. So if you don't have a relationship, you're a failure. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I just, from the outside looking in, I'm like, it's sad because I don't see the person, you know, and yet we have this very fleeting thing called one life. Yeah. So I don't know how it'll affect, but it's very sad.
Okay. So just to begin with, a mother wound affects how a person feels about themselves.
Okay.
And I'd like to point this out because unhealed trauma usually is transferred trauma. So if you're looking at the African perspective, there are a lot of traumatized people who have brought up many children who are also traumatized
and passing it on
to the next and the next generation. Luckily, we are currently having these conversations. So there's a lot that has been passed from our parents who are not aware of what they were going through, or even not self-aware, and so it caused them to transfer a lot. And so societal norms, for example, marriage, where women have this thought that every woman has to get married, and so women have this affects them. So you find that when someone is not married by the age of 27 or 28 or 30, they begin to feel pressured, and for that causes anxiety, depression, and also with the fact there is with the fact that there is a lot of stigma around mental health, you'd find that issues like postpartum depression is not talked about because you're asked. Everybody wants to have a child.
This is what you're here for.
Why are you sad about the one that you have? And also issues like anxiety and depression. There's this normal thing that goes around that you're told, jikaze tu, be strong.
Strong.
Jikaze tu. So it disallows women to actually be open about their mental health.
So in closing,
yes,
I want tips on how, as women who are on a healing journey, how can we get closer to the blue? That sounded so wrong.
Blue ball.
This is not that type of show. How can we get to the blue ball?
Okay, maybe let me just say we are talking about this blue ball. And then you've done a lot of work. What are some of the tips?
Oh my God. I think you have to, it's scary. because you have to open dark rooms in your mind that maybe you've not wanted to go into. But like, I think coming to the other side, I'm like, there is light once you work through that. Do they call it shadow work? Once you get through it, like there's so much light, there's so much clarity. So I would just say like, it's difficult. It being difficult, like the beginning steps of healing, being difficult doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It is going to be difficult. Also because childhood trauma forces you to see people who are so instrumental in your life, sometimes not in the best light. And you'll feel guilty. Like, it's only now I can openly say the bad traits my dad had. For a while, I'd be like, don't talk about my dad like that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to accept. So it is difficult, but it is worth it in the end, because you're kind of like reclaiming your life and the power over your life. So I know that's not a tip. It's like I'm a cheerleader, like cheering you on. But I think that's the first one. The only other thing I'll say is boundaries. Hey, Daisy. Boundaries. I feel like, especially for women in the African context, because we are kind of like praised when we don't have boundaries. It's like you're a good woman when you allow people to take and take and take, right? I feel like once you learn how to have healthy boundaries, like that's a game changer. Yeah. Those are my only 2 tips.
Wow, inner work and boundaries.
Yes,
awesome.
Am I on track? I was a student.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'd like to say that the inner child in us is alive. She comes out sometimes as a limitation, sometimes as a strength. And it's very important that you notice what your inner child feels like. And this you can only notice by doing a lot of self-work. So self-work could look like reparenting yourself, basically giving yourself what you missed as a child. If you were punished a lot as a child, loving yourself more, loving yourself 4 times more than the love that you received from your parents, being present for yourself, being self-aware. That is basically reparenting yourself. Number 2, just like you said, a lot of inner work, seeking support, for example, looking for therapy so that you actually process and join the dots, because at some point you actually need someone to guide you so that you can notice that these dots connect to this and this and this.
Exactly.
So actually seeking support so that you can notice what the inner child might be feeling. Setting boundaries, just like you said, is very important.
It's difficult in our context, but it's still as important.
Yes. So setting boundaries is number 1, not putting yourself in environments that would continuously hurt you. Also understanding yourself and understanding what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because you cannot set a boundary without actually understanding what works for you. So, and also just learning to say no. When you're required to say no, you are comfortable with saying no. That
is that no. And knowing that it's valid. Sometimes you don't even have to give an explanation. You know, I think it's so important. Thank you so much, Daisy. Oh my goodness. For helping us understand childhood trauma and how it's showing up in our lives, in our relationships that matter to us. And so you're doing this work on yourself, not only for you to have a more peaceful, clear life, but even the relationships that matter to you will actually bloom because you arrive in them so much better, right? So thank you so much. And in the description of this episode, we have put a link to Convocare, which is the organization that Daisy leads, in case you want to reach out to Daisy and start to take your healing journey a step further. I encourage you to do so. But thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure that you drop your comments if there's something that resonated with you or you connected with in the comment section, and subscribe so you do not miss the next episode of For Mannerless Women.
Oh, wow.